You thought they were just for entertainment.
Wake up!
The original use of simulation for the military was strictly training, and the gaming industry is about excitement and entertainment. How can we blend those two together?
But to some, it's the difference between life and death.
The Army has zero tolerance for casualties. When they lose a guy, that means that an 18-year-old kid is going home in a body bag and his parents get a letter.
We need backup and transport.
We are trying to tie together the Army's training objectives with the entertainment aspect of the game.
From my military background, I recognize that anything that enhances the performance of soldiers has got to be a good thing.
So gear up and get ready.
Stand by!
Go, go, go!
Soldiers were playing on their own time at all hours of day and night, voluntarily training. And this is not something that generally happens.
This is gaming in the military.
We're under heavy fire. Help!
1982, the U.S. Army considers using the popular arcade game Battlezone as a training simulator for the Bradley fighting vehicle. Ultimately, the project is canned, but the idea is not forgotten. 1996, id Software releases Doom. The game shakes the industry and also perks the interest of the United States Marines, who then create a modified version called Marine Doom to supplement their training. Gaming in the military has arrived.
The Army has had some success in adapting commercial titles to use for portions of their training. For instance, I know they've adapted Doom, and some groups have used Quake, and we even talked to one group that was using Medal of Honor, and they were using it to get down their squad movement and movement by fire and a lot of their drills.
1999, a Navy ensign finishes intermediate training with a perfect score, thanks in part to Microsoft Flight Simulator 98. The Navy evaluates the game for use as a supplement to flight training.
The Navy asked me to come in and help them evaluate the success of a young ensign utilizing Flight Sim 98 to help him get through flight school. From that, we were able to move in, and I've been doing research on gaming for a long time. From my military background, I recognize that anything that enhances the performance of soldiers, especially the young soldiers who are much more game-oriented, has got to be a good thing.
While using simulators is common in the military, the value of adapting a retail game into a training tool cannot be ignored.
The original use of simulation for the military was strictly training, and the gaming industry is about excitement and entertainment. And how can we blend those two together?
What we had to do was decompose the games to find out what elements of the game could be useful for real training. A lot of games, obviously, you shoot somebody with an M16 and they blow up. Well, that doesn't really happen. So that was negative training, so we'd have to take that part out.
To be successful in the game, to continue to have fun in the game, to be entertained by the game, you need to learn the lessons that the Army wants you to learn. So we are trying to tie together the Army's training objectives with the entertainment aspect of the game, so that basically the same play will serve both masters.
The hard part then came in looking at the training programs to find out if we could detail what those requirements were against the actual games. And we were successful in several cases, both in first-person shooter and crew games, utilizing Spearhead for tank training and utilizing Rainbow Six for a first-person shooter.
Cost is one of the biggest factors contributing to the use of commercial games.
The transition in the military from, again, these very large proprietary training devices to the PC is one that is lagging a little bit behind the civilian sector, if you like. And I think the Army, quite wisely, is looking for what they call COTS solutions, consumer off-the-shelf. They're looking for things that have already been developed and the R&D has been paid for, that they can modify at relatively low cost for their own use. It's not just us. I think other people are leading the way in other respects, and the Army is taking advantage of that.
It's very expensive to put a battalion out in the field for live training. It can cost over $1 million a day. But because that's so expensive, Troops don't get a chance to do it all that often, and it also takes a whole lot of room. So the Army really wanted something that would help reinforce training that the soldiers could do every day in their barracks. By no means is this a replacement for live action training or training in the field. It's actually seen more as a supplement to something they can do day to day in their downtime.
Thanks to COTS, for less than $5,000, the military can have a machine that does the same job as a $650,000 simulator. As one example of COTS in action, in 2000, the Army adapts Novologic's Delta Force games as training sims.
We were in touch with a now Major Illingworth over there who was interested in how basically computer games could be used to help train soldiers. He's working with the Land Warrior project, which is outfitting the next generation of soldier with technological equipment. One of the things they wanted to do is they wanted to kind of rehearse how this equipment would work in the field without having to deploy it.
They were very interested in the multiplayer aspects of Delta Force, the fact that you could get, in our case, up to 50 different people across the internet, could be anywhere in the world with a good internet connection, and they could train together.
So we went ahead and modeled what they call mount sites, military operations in urban terrain. And these are basically little villages set up with multi-story buildings and a town square. And we went and modeled these environments, and then we adapted our Delta Force 2 game to have some of the Land Warrior features.
The fact that we could model real-world terrain easily was very valuable to them. The version which the military uses actually has detailed models of Army bases as part of the game. Specifically mount sites, so that soldiers can rehearse on a computer and then go to a military exercise and in real life do what they did on the computer.
And Novologic's strategy pays off.
When we first provided the Land Warrior software to the test platoon at Fort Bragg, 50 or so soldiers were going to be the first in the U.S. Army to receive the actual Land Warrior hardware system. And before they got the hardware, they got our game. So networks were set up in the barracks at Fort Bragg. And the feedback we got was that the soldiers were playing on their own time at all hours of day and night, voluntarily training. And this is not something that generally happens. I mean, you don't find soldiers, voluntarily doing push-ups.
But Delta Force is just a start. Another game on the horizon will change the way our soldiers train forever.
Papa Bear, this is Alpha Squad. We need backup and transport at Delta Charlie 6-4. Do you copy? Over.
There's a patrol to the west. Bravo, this is King 6. Area secure. Move on to the next target.
Novologic isn't the only developer that manages to catch the eyes of the military. In 2001, a company in the Czech Republic called Bohemia Interactive finishes their first project, an ultra-realistic action game for the PC called Operation Flashpoint. The game is showered with praise and sells over 1 million copies worldwide.
Operation Flashpoint is a great example. They have a lot of realism in there. If you run, you're breathing heavy and your aim point bobs up and down and stuff like that. That's great for the entertainment value for the first-person shooter.
And then the few and the proud step in.
We examined a couple platforms, and then we had Lieutenant Mattis come aboard, and he transitioned over. He saw Operation Flashpoint. He made a couple contacts with Codemasters and vendor helper. He introduced us both, and we sat down, we evaluated, and as the program went forward, we found that Operation Flashpoint was a better tool. Better platform, better gaming engine, and it suited the Marine Corps to all their needs and requirements.
In December of 2001, Bohemia Interactive and Orlando-based Coalescent Technologies began work on a modified version of Operation Flashpoint called Virtual Battlefield Systems, or VBS-1. One of the first steps to converting a game into a military simulator is to ensure that everything from uniforms to vehicles looks just like the real thing.
We did include some of the models that are typical to the Marine Corps, like the amphibious assault vehicles, the Harrier, which is not included in the original game, the CH-53, which is a transport helicopter, so the Marines could see the uniqueness of the game. Eventually what we'd do is change the uniforms, make sure we have Marine-specific weapons, like the small arms weapons, some of the anti-tank, like the AT-4, the SMAWs, some of the Marine Corps unique weapons that it's part of their TO.
Both companies take great care to ensure that the new game meets the strict requirements of the U.S. Marine Corps.
Alpha 1, Convoy's now leaving in 5 minutes.
If you're trying to train, what you need to start with is the learning objectives. What is it you're trying to train? And then you need to basically build the whole product around that objective.
It's not necessarily the mission that's being carried out that's important. It's the pre-planning stages. When they issue the frag order and they go down as the chain of command as they're given a mission and they carry that mission out. It's the actual role rehearsal and the pre-planning and then the debriefing. What went wrong? What happened? Why didn't you accomplish this mission?
In February 2002, the Marines began using VBS-1, and its execution looks a lot like your average LAN party.
Typically how we set it up is we have 16 computers. So the team's a little bit offset, but what we would do is we would have maybe 3 to 4 fire teams playing against what they call an opposition force, which is actually guys behind the computer playing the bad guys.
While both Delta Force and Operation Flashpoint are games that became training tools, sometimes this transformation can go the other way around. The most recent example is Full Spectrum Warrior, a strategy game developed by Pandemic Studios.
The Full Spectrum Warrior started off initially as a training project for the U.S. Army so that they could better train their incoming light infantrymen in how to fight in an urban combat environment. We're taking the assets that we've created with under the auspices of the government and we're parlaying them into a game that has an unparalleled level of realism.
We're calling it a tactical action game, although it really is hard to kind of fit within any known genre. In a very high level, it's playing a war movie. It's with an ensemble cast, moving them through a dangerous terrain, an urban situation, and fighting it out, being their commander.
The first version of Full Spectrum Warrior is built for the Army from the ground up with a budget of $5 million.
One of the primary differences between what they did with us and what they did with the other games is that rather than adapting an existing civilian software product, they actually came to us and formed the software product so that it directly incorporates the training and doctrine in the very core of the gameplay. So this was developed specifically by the Army, for the Army.
As a result, there are some key differences between Full Spectrum Warrior and other games.
The goal for most games is purely on excitement and the emotional thrill and the graphical experience.
Tango down!
Whereas the Army's goals are really to train their soldiers, not necessarily to make big explosions, but to accomplish their mission with the least possible use of force and also to keep their guys safe. You know, in a game, keeping your guys safe is not a really major factor. If you lose a guy, you just hit reload or you get another life. The Army has zero tolerance for casualties. When they lose a guy, that means that an 18-year-old kid is going home in a body bag and his parents get a letter.
And to turn this military game into a commercial product, a little bit of Hollywood comes into play.
When people play games, they expect a little more graphic and audio impact, akin to what they see in movies. Some of the ways that that's evidence is when an M4 fires, it really isn't a super loud, ear-shattering crack. But for a gamer's perspective, that's what he's used to seeing in movies, and there's a payoff there, a visceral thrill to hearing that when he has his guys shoot. So we make some changes basically to sort of Jerry Bruckheimer, the Army version.
We'll have a story to kind of keep it all together so it makes sense and progresses through.
So what type of cargo does it need to have?
Something that we wouldn't want the bad guys to get.
We're also going to add more individuality to the characters. In the Army version, who the characters weren't as important as just making sure that they behave like humans. But in a real game, I think that players are going to expect that those are actually characters.
When Pandemic Studios finishes the Army version of Full Spectrum Warrior, the top brass is impressed.
They had a blast.
The reaction's been through the roof. They were really blown out of the water in terms of what they've gotten. Their traditional simulations like this are like Excel spreadsheet, little dots, top down, move it runs a little, very turn-based. And they were just amazed that they are able now to actually visualize what it means to be in an urban combat situation.
With the Army version done, Pandemic focuses on the retail version, which hits store shelves in the first quarter of 2004.
Contain the enemy with explosive force.
Meanwhile, the Army decides to try their hand at something completely different.
Sir, that's not the enemy!
12 o'clock. Enemy. MI-17. 1,000.
while the military has success adapting commercial games into training tools and vice versa. In 2000, the Army begins work on something completely different. The project is a game, but instead of using it as a training tool, it will be used for recruiting. The name of the game is America's Army.
Colonel Wardinsky, who came up with the idea, he saw his teenage son being online quite a bit. So he came up with the notion of saying, why not play Army, if you will, on the internet?
So it seemed like a natural marrying up of the Army, a new piece of technology, and the internet. And that was the idea that sort of led to building the Army game.
Uncle Sam enlists the aid of the Moves Institute in California to help make the Army game. The budget is estimated at $7.5 million.
The mission of the Moves Institute is to do basic research, application, and education in the grand challenges of modeling virtual environments and simulation. Areas we work in are 3D visual simulation, networked virtual environments, computer-generated autonomy, human performance engineering, immersive technologies, and defense and entertainment collaboration. So what we've been doing the last couple of years is trying to bring in entertainment industry technology into the Department of Defense and trying to repurpose it for Department of Defense uses. So that's the sort of the origin of why we got together with Colonel Wardinsky on the America's Army project.
It's kind of a hybrid group. The group that manages the effort is at the Naval Postgraduate Schools. They're professors up there. Then under them, we've got a group of students who work on the game doing research. And then we brought in from industry individuals to fill each of the key roles, designer, producer, or animator. And so it's a mix again.
And just as Novalogic learned before, the development team for America's Army finds out that the military isn't your typical customer.
Okay, we have a very demanding client.
Wake up!
Which is the U.S. Army. We're basically the developer, but we're kind of an in-the-tent developer. You know, what we have to do is produce something entertaining, something that is Army accurate, something that is also meshes with the political message that the U.S. Army would like to show about itself. It has to pass muster from Casey's team. It then is shown to the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army. We have the specialists in the Army check the game out for accuracy, and then and only then can we put it up onto the internet for download.
And some very unique steps are taken to prepare the America's Army team.
And I started taking the developers out to the various Army posts across the continental United States to include Alaska. And we started gathering up all the reference data, going out to rangers, firing weapons, interviewing soldiers, taking loads and loads of film and stills and video, and we came back and started piecing things together.
What we had to do is educate them about the Army. So this is kind of an interesting thing we did in our project. We bought BDUs for everyone, we bought them the boots, and we shipped them off to 19 different Army posts. And we had them go through the rifle range at Fort Benning and learn how to throw hand grenades, learn how to do all of the very exciting things that you do in the Army. Go up on the parachute jump towers and go on night parachute drops and all of this very inspiring stuff.
Good morning, soldier, and welcome to the M16 qualification range. Today's task is to qualify with the M16A2 rifle.
At the same point in time, you're not going to learn anything inside that game that's going to allow you to become you know, an expert marksman or anything else. There's a big difference between keyboard and mouse versus a real weapon. So there's no secrets being given away inside there.
Good afternoon, soldier. This is the obstacle course.
Of course, for a game that is about the U.S. Army, realism is of the utmost importance.
We wanted to make it so that the weapons worked just like in the Army. They sounded like they worked in the Army. We wanted it so that when the shells hit the ground, if it was grass, they sounded like grass. If it was concrete, it sounded like concrete. If you were inside and there was a carpet, it sounded like carpet. So we wanted it to have the best sound, the best visual displays. We didn't want last year's game repackaged for the Army. We wanted to take the next generation engine.
Jumper going aloft. Assume a good let-up position with that T-10 parachute.
We went and licensed the Epic Games Next Generation engine.
Jumper, your parachute landing fall and overall grade was satisfactory.
In 2002, the game is finally finished. The ensuing launch of America's Army is more successful than anyone imagined.
We came out on July 4th, and we had 140 servers we'd contracted for to support the game, and I think on that date, maybe 70 of them were already deployed and running. And about 5 minutes after we launched, our servers sort of started going off the net. You couldn't see them because they were so busy getting pinged by kids trying to join them. And we quickly realized that we had way more demand than we had sort of structured for.
So at this point, I believe there's something on the order of 7 million downloads and CDs of the game. We have something on the order of 1.4 million registered players.
One of the major factors in the success of America's Army is that the game is completely free.
So what the Army wanted to do was they wanted to get the young adults who could install a game on a computer, download it from the web, and play it. They want those guys in because a lot of the weapon systems have interfaces that are starting to look like video game controllers. So the idea from the Army is, you got to get those guys in. And that is a real big deal. So putting it up on the web for free, we thought of that from the start.
So what's next? Coalescent has plans to expand VBS-1 to train everyone from firemen to Secret Service agents. America's Army continues to grow, and more soldiers are playing games. And with new titles like Full Spectrum Warrior on the way, gamers will continue to reap the benefits of realistic games, while the military will have effective and fun training tools.
Go, go, go. Stick together and stay near the road.
Your overall grade was satisfactory.